insights. The purpose of our research project is to create evidence-based research that maps Australian mining and investment in the global rush to net zero. This is to be conducted in solidarity with networks of grassroots campaigners contributing to debate on what a genuine, just transition might look like. So we're examining the role of Australian companies in the extractive response to climate action. Our methods currently at this stage have included literature review, stakeholder mapping, and policy analysis. We will further work on case studies in the next stage. So commencing with some background, the clean energy transition has been marketed as the dominant technological mitigation approach to address climate change. In the lead up to the COP26, many wealthy nations have released policy platforms that incentivize a shift from fossil fuel intensive energy systems to material intensive systems. This material transition is predicted to create enormous demand for so-called critical minerals, culminating in over 3 billion tonnes of minerals predicted to be needed over coming decades. The potential for negative consequences on human rights and ecological systems from such a massive expansion of mining activities has yet to be adequately factored into the new emerging green economic policies. Substituting carbon-intensive energy with cleaner technologies does not necessarily free our economies of their dependence on finite resources. Neither is it really empirically determined yet as to whether transitioning to clean energy is feasible without systemic change to address the large levels of emissions by wealthy nations, heavy polluting industries, and the luxury carbon emitters. Governments are currently not questioning endless growth, excessive consumption, ecologically damaging resource practices, and global inequalities. Instead, they are creating subsidies for techno fixes and green growth approaches. Whilst that starts to address the issue of burning immense amounts of fossil fuels, green growth hides the systemic root causes of the climate crisis, whilst minimizing the alternatives emerging from resistance struggles. We are examining this phenomenon as through the lens of extractivism, particularly as it relates to mining. Over history, mining has been associated with conflicts and violent resource frontiers. By resource frontiers, we mean places where the resources are found and where external forces such as companies enter to extract those resources, often without the consent from people already living in or reliant on those places for livelihoods or cultural heritage. This often involves violence that is invisible to the majority of those who end up using the commodities. Mining has been the most deadly sector for environmental defenders, according to Global Witness reports. Many of the most destructive companies are set to capture the bulk of so-called opportunities from greening the economy, which is starting to exacerbate existing impacts and create new sacrifice zones with devastating impacts on local communities and ecosystems, as several scholars have started to write about. We are finding from the literature review and from emerging case study accounts from the front lines that the global expansion of extractive activities for the green energy transition is creating new resource frontiers, risking human rights abuses, conflict, and violence in similar ways to past neo-colonial expansionism, thus having the potential to systematically replicate deeply unequal historical injustices between the global north and the global south. Within this context, Australia is pegged by many industry experts and being propelled by their ally, the United States, to play a key role in the mining of key transition minerals. Australia is one of the biggest players in the global mining industry. holding 40% of the market total share. Some of the largest mining companies come from Australia, including Rio Tinto and BHP. Extractive settler colonial narratives have held sway here since the expropriation of First Nations lands by the British Empire in 1788, thus shaping politics and national identity in Australia. For example, the White Australia policy was in large part a strategy to capture land over mineral resources from non-Europeans. Mining concerns that continue today include failures to respect Indigenous rights, the continued pollution of waterways, land clearing, and legacy issues of abandoned mining sites. Australia has a political and economic environment that is supportive of mining. There's a revolving door between resource-based government officials and the Australian Minerals Council. Recently, the IMF identified Australia as one of the 4 nations that could enjoy an extra 1% growth in gross domestic product, building on critical mineral exports if the world achieved net zero emissions by 2050. After speaking to the Quad recently on securing access to critical minerals deemed essential for a clean energy future, Scott Morrison declared Australia's role was very important due to our immense ability to be really good at digging stuff up. So Australia is the world's largest producer and exporter of lithium. Lithium is a metal required in greatest quantities for electric vehicle batteries and is in rapid increasing demand as more countries commit to electrification of transport. Rio Tinto's head of economics recently said EV sales are on track to hit up to 55% of the world's total light vehicle sales. Rio argues that 80% of the supply will need to come from new mining projects. Australia's lithium exploration and project expansion is both domestic and global. Domestically, projects are concentrated in the Pilbara region in Western Australia. We will hear today from Cato, a First Nation speaker, about some of that. Overseas, Australian companies are expanding in the lithium triangle of Bolivia, Argentina, and Chile in the salt flats at great risk to hydrological and ecological cycles, as well as Indigenous cultural practices. In Quebec, in Canada, Sayona Mining is developing a hard rock lithium project, which is impacting on ancestral lands of First Nations people, and we'll hear some more about that from one of our speakers. Rio Tinto is also involved in the contested Jadar mine project, where there is much resistance in Serbia. Australian companies are also seeking to explore for lithium in conflict regions such as the Democratic Republic of Congo. Moving to rare earths, another important mineral for wind turbines and electric vehicles. Rare earth minerals are predicted to increase in demand by 1,000% to meet clean energy transition requirements by 2050. The extraction process of rare earths is extremely environmentally damaging, involving wastewater and tailing ponds that risk leaking acids, heavy metals, and radioactive elements. Rare earth mining has long been dominated by Chinese-owned companies who control 80% of the world's supply. However, Australia is increasingly being called upon to secure access to this critical mineral to its allies, particularly the US. Rare earths is also used in military equipment. Rare earth mining has also resulted in incredible amount of polluted communities and destroyed landscapes in China. And we'll hear today from concerns from Malaysia. Currently, Australia accounts for more than half of the new rare earth element projects in the global pipeline, despite the country only containing about 2.8% of the world's reserves. Australia is negotiating trade agreements with China, the US, and other world powers in order to retain its share of the global market. The hubs for rare earths in Australia are located in Western Australia, and new explorations are underway in South Australia, Victoria as well. Lynas is our biggest company in the rare earth sector. It mines in Western Australia and operates a processing plant in Malaysia. Our speaker, Lee Tan, today will speak more to this. Australian companies are also investing in rare earth metals in Canada, the US, Tanzania, Malawi, and Sierra Leone. And now I will pass over to my co-researcher, Liz Downs, to continue with further insights.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yep.
Okay, Claire, we might need to share my notes on this screen because I can't see any notes. I can speak ad lib if necessary. So if we can move on to copper, just the next slide. We had some problems with the tech earlier, that's why we're doing it this way.
Are you seeing copper now?
Copper hotspots, yep. Okay, I can't see any notes, so I'm ad-libbing. So if I don't make any sense, that's why. So yes, so copper has one of the largest world spread in terms of Australian companies. We have companies, we've got I don't know if everyone can see me pointing to the Andean copper belt here. We currently have the biggest share of our copper mining in Chile, with the world's biggest copper mine, Escondida, is owned by BHP, which is also the world's biggest mining company. So the Atacama Desert is hosting a lot of Australia's current copper production, and BHP and Rio and some of these big companies are looking to that, possibly those mines slowing down in the next few years. So they are expanding their exploration up into Peru and particularly into Ecuador, which we're going to have a focus session on a bit later tonight, today morning for some of you. We've also got some copper mining happening in the US and some problematic projects there, particularly Resolution Mine, which is owned by Rio and BHP, where there is some threats to some Apache sacred sites. So there's some resistance around that. We've also got exploration in Canada and operations in Canada. We've also got BHP wanting to move into the Democratic Republic of Congo. And basically the issue here is that companies are wanting to move into riskier areas because the green growth market is rapidly expanding the demand of copper, and we're heading into a supply crunch, which means it is driving basically companies to be quite aggressive in their exploration into new areas. We've also got Mongolia here, has a massive copper mine owned by Rio Tinto. Next slide, please.
So sorry, Liz, just letting you know we're running a bit over time.
Yep, so I'll have to be very quick. So basically, this is the slogan of Yes to Life, No to Mining, global coalition of mining frontlines around the world. We can't mine our way out of the climate crisis. I had added some slides on which we're going to lead into the speakers on frontline. Here we go. Water is life. I really wanted to show this one because this is an Ecuadorian march in 2018, a national march against mining, where thousands of people walked for 6 days over the Andes to the capital city of Quito, carrying a river, as you can see. And this is one of the more, water is so important, and all of these green extractive mining, copper, lithium and rare earths, are going to have the biggest impact on water on, you know, in areas where water is sacred, where ecosystems are likely to be destroyed. And so that's a key theme of the frontline movements. And I would like to cut this short. And oh, that's a beautiful picture of the Oktedi River in Papua New Guinea in the 1980s, when BHP was dumping the tailings into the water, showing the damage that copper mining can do. And we've got lithium here as well. But I might stop there, and we would like to move on to our frontline speakers for today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Liz. We'll be handing over to Cato Muir now, who will be able to, should be able to share your slides now, Cato. Very, very excited to have you with us. He's a Aboriginal Australian cultural and community leader and activist, and an innovative thinker. And I will just hand straight over to you now, Cato. So hopefully you should be able to share your screen. And you're still just muted there, so you'll need to unmute.
Got it. Well, would I have no slides apart from the image behind me, but I will start by acknowledging all our elders, past and present, across the world. Special acknowledgement here in Australia to, well, I'm presenting today from Whadjuk Noongar country, and just acknowledging some of my colleagues who are on the line today from the Aboriginal Heritage Action Alliance, as well as Original Power, the National Native Title Council, and the WA Alliance. So, Nay, just to check, how much time do I have?
It's okay. We can make the panel a little bit shorter. You go for, you have 10 minutes.
10 minutes. I can work with 10 minutes. So, starting with those acknowledgements, I think I will focus this discussion of extractivism around 4 key themes. The first, that's well known to us all, is extractivism is essentially a relocation of wealth, the inherent wealth of the land, the wealth of First Nations peoples, and its relocation from our ancestral territories, our ancestral lands, into creating wealth of mostly Europeans, but there are other nations and other peoples who benefit from this extraction of resources. This is the story of colonisation and European imperialism, and it continues today in very much the same form, with the exception that it is now transitioning and transforming into what's becoming popularly known as green economics. In the green economy that we are merging into, there are opportunities as well as threats. The threats are obvious. There is a greater reliance or need for minerals. The traditional minerals like nickel are getting a new life, copper getting a new life, and new and emerging minerals like lithium are becoming very popular and very high in the supply chain and value chain. So these are, in extractivism, these are the things that we need to be aware of. The other big thing, though, that we really, really, really need to be aware of is water, and how a lot of these extractivist operations do not take into account the amount of water that they use in the processing, both of extracting minerals, but also processing and creating these shiny new green energy products that the world will start to rely on in the near future. So they're the background issues. Now, it is well known across Australia and across the world that governments are established to protect these businesses to go about their activities of extracting these resources. Here in Australia, we are currently in a campaign against the state of Western Australia, who seeks to continue to extract resources similar to the image behind me, which is a slide showing land on my country, which is a sacred site. We have ancestral stories going back that we share with other Aboriginal people all along our dreaming tracks and songlines. This ancestral site has been designated for destruction under Section 18 of the West Australian Aboriginal Heritage Act. So legally sanctioned, legally authorised destruction, which was similarly given to Rio Tinto for the destruction of the Juukan Gorge site. So the Australian government is choosing or saying that it will amend the Aboriginal Heritage Act. We have a campaign or a battle with cultural authority leaders and other Aboriginal groups in Western Australia, who all we are simply asking for is we do not want our sacred sites destroyed. The way the legislation is being developed and framed is it gives the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs all authority and permit to destroy our sacred sites. So it's a simple campaign. There's no need to exercise too much brain matter in it to say, please do not destroy our sacred places. That seems to be a difficult concept for the West Australian government to grasp. They dress it up as in we are opposed to development. Not necessarily so. One of our sacred sites, one of our very important heritage places, is a place called Wilgie-Mia, which is a mine site that's 20,000 years old, and it is still mined and used by Aboriginal people. So we have one of the oldest mine sites continually operating in the world. It is a sacred site, and we do not necessarily oppose development, but what we do oppose is developers and government destroying our sacred sites. So how do we fix that? One is the traditional campaign, which we are mounting and continue to prosecute in Australia. But the opportunity of the new green economics is that we may draw on the boundaries set by finance and capital, and the end consumers, the people who are consuming the batteries that go into electric cars, are the people that are switching on green renewable energy power. Those people have an expectation that their lifestyle, their way of life, their investments do not have a negative impact on First Nations peoples or on the environment and our culture and our heritage. So one of the campaign strategies that we have engaged in Australia is to work directly with responsible investors, ask them to create a series of protocols. And I see there is an opportunity in Europe with the direction that the European Union is going to press home the argument that First Nations peoples, Indigenous peoples would seek that anyone operating on our ancestral lands with environmental, social and governance credentials, so the ESG, do so in such a way that it does not have an ongoing or substantive negative impact on our cultures, on our peoples and on our environments. So that's the opportunity coming out of this discussion in green economics. The negative stories of extractivism, the transfer of wealth, and the suppression of First Nations peoples and activists who are fighting for a just and stable society, that story is all too common and it continues to affect us all. I, for one, would hope that coming out of the COP26 discussion and debate, and particularly with those who are developing ESG models and frameworks, that you really build in the First Nations, Indigenous concerns about culture, people, and the environment, so that those who are funding these developments are prepared and can make conscious decisions about the impact of their development. But they can also go and ask the government, the corporations, the difficult questions about how those corporations are extracting those minerals and resources and what is the impact of that. That then flows on to the third consequence, which is the financiers, the corporates, will then dictate to the governments how the governments introduce laws that regulate and govern the extraction of these resources. So that is one of the strategies. I will also, before I sign off, extend an invitation to those peoples in other parts of the world who are suffering the negative impacts of our great national export, which is the mining companies that we have exported all over the world. We have a campaign with the Australian Council for Corporate Responsibility, the National Native Title Council, the Aboriginal Heritage Protection Alliance in Australia, where we are asking our mega corporation mining companies to act in accordance with human rights as the basic principles, but also to extend their corporate social responsibility to other parts of the world. I think we had a measure of success with that with the operations in Oak Flats in the US. But these companies are very much aware that they can no longer hide in remote parts of the world and undertake activities that have a negative impact. So that's my presentation for the moment. I thank you all for the opportunity to present, and I look forward to more robust discussions in the future.
Thank you so much for both that presentation and for the amazing work that you are doing. We will hand over now to Councillor Belinda Wabegijig, who has the Natural Resources Portfolio for the Long Point First Nations Council. You should be able to share your slides now, Belinda.
Thank you. Everyone can hear me okay? Perfect.
Yep, great audio.
All right, so Kwesheba, thank you for having me today. So as mentioned, my name is Belinda Wabegijig. I sit on the council for Long Point First Nation, also known as Winnoway. And I'm the Natural Resource Portfolio holder. This is my first mandate as elected council member. So I'm still learning, but I'm really much enjoying the learning process. So I wanted to talk today about the impacts of lithium mining on Long Point First Nation lands. So the mining company that I'll be addressing my presentation about today is the Sayona Quebec. So Sayona Quebec is a Canadian subsidiary company of the Australian company Sayona Mining. Sayona projects to build and operate at least 3 lithium mining facilities on the unceded Anishinaabe-Aki territory in the Abitibi-Témiscamingue region. They are currently developing the Otse project in Lamut, the Tamsim project close to Winnoway on LPFN unceded territory. And most recently, Sayona also purchased the North American lithium mine in Lacorne. So just take a second to look at my map here. You can actually see all the red dots are the mining locations. So for a small, tiny region in Quebec, in Western Quebec, these are pretty close together. And the lithium Tamsim mine is about 15 to 20 kilometers from Winnoway. Winnoway is in the orange rectangle, which is where I am today. So the Tamsim project is an open pit mine targeting the area just north of Lac-Simard, located on Long Point First Nations unceded territory, and particularly close to Winnoway, lying on its southeast shore. The company holds 350 mining claims covering more than 20,250 hectares along the north shore of Lac-Simard. And my map here just shows all of the claims that they have. So the project is currently at the stage of exploration. The first exploration drills were conducted in February 2019. But Sayona now intends to start a new drilling phase following an optimistic technical report dated from March 2021. I'd like to also point out that in this report, it states that as this area has a long history of exploration and mining, the firm, aka Sayona, does not anticipate any barriers to access the project for work plan going forward. So a little bit of background as to what that means. There have been claims around Lac-Simard since the early 50s, and since the 50s, Long Point First Nation has been working really hard to, contest each one of those claims. So here we are in 2021, still have claims along our beautiful lake, and we're still working hard to protect it. So I wanted to also talk about the Tamsim project and the community response, because I thought it was really important to highlight the community's take on the mining project itself. So in April 2021, Long Point First Nation was informed that Sayona was imminently undertaking new exploration drills on its unceded territory. So the council immediately sent a letter to the CEO of Sayona to express a lack of consent regarding any activity on Long Point First Nation territory. The same position was expressed to the provincial authorities. At the same period, a member of Long Point First Nation launched an online petition against Sayona's mining activities that has, as of today, collected more than 22,000 signatures, making it one of the most signed petitions on change.org. So along with the petition, well, we began capturing a lot of attention and support from many people around, not just in Canada, but around the world. And this led Sayona to contact the council again. So a presentation was held by Sayona with Long Point First Nation in the following weeks. But the presentation was unsatisfying for the community, considering the scarcity of information regarding the potential impacts of the project. Sayona then suspended all of their drilling operations on the Tamsim site and told the media that they were committed to not do any work until they obtained the consent of the community. So don't get too excited yet, because that's just the beginning of the story. But now, since the end of the summer, the company is expressing its desire to start drilling again for fall 2021. So in the meantime, while Long Point First Nation is repeatedly demanding proper and distinct consultation carried out by Crown authorities, the Quebec government affirms that its duty to consult is not yet engaged at this early in the process. In addition, Sayona's CEO recently publicly affirmed that conversations were ongoing for Long Point First Nation towards the conclusion of an agreement, which is inaccurate. We haven't had any discussions with the CEO or the company itself. And by having the CEO publicly state so, it just, it's not only inaccurate, but it also confuses our members. So issues raised by the Tamsim project. Sayona's Tamsim project raises several issues at the environmental level. Well, not only at the environmental level, but also more concerning is Long Point's First Nations Aboriginal rights to fish are jeopardized greatly by mining activities. The work itself, the exploration work itself can have direct impacts on their surrounding wetlands and bodies of water, according to the company's own admissions. However, these drillings are only a milestone in the path marked out towards an operation of open pit mine in the heart of a living environment of great vulnerability and great importance to Long Point First Nation. So I just want to pause there for a second and talk a bit about this photo. Here I am out on actually Lac Simard ice fishing. I had my children with me that day, and I haven't lived in the community growing up. So now that I'm on council and a teacher at the school, I find it really important to, bring the kids out on the land, not just at school, but my kids too at home. So don't worry, this fish was caught and released, but I just wanted to highlight that the Lac Simard is dear to my heart too, much like the community. So the Sayona claims cover in particular the Ottawa River from one bank to another, while its major watercourse constituting one of the most important tributaries of St. Lawrence River. The claims also cover the littoral zone of the north shore of Lac Simard. These environments have a high ecological value, compromise many of our members' camps, and the camps along Lac Simard are places where members practice traditional activities and ancestral rites with their families, with their fellow community members. Here's another photo that I took of Lac Simard, an evening boat ride with my kids up the river. And I just wanted to end my presentation by saying that Nibi, the water, is very important to an Anishinaabe like myself. My traditional belief is that women are responsible for caring for the water. And thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of Long Point and the, that not to express our concerns and our issues that we have with the Tamsim project, because myself, along with other women in the community, will continue to advocate for Lac Simard, because keeping our water pure means keeping our nation safe for future generations. Miigwech.
Thank you so much, Belinda. That was a fantastic presentation. We started a bit late. I think there's a few people in the waiting room. I'm having trouble letting them in if somebody else can. And it's really such an important part of the story to be considering lifestyle and traditional access to lands. And because we're running a little bit behind, we might bump this panel and combine the panels at the end and move into our next segment. And we will have a chance for more chat at the end. So people, you're most welcome to put questions in the chat as well. So our next section is on Australian green imperialism and frontlines in the global south. And I'd like to invite Yvonne Ramos to share her presentation. But first we're going to be hearing or watching a short video from her. So I'll just put that up now. Can everyone see that video?
Yes.
Yes. Great. All right. Hopefully the audio comes through. Please let me know if it's not.
Soy Yanina Estacuaz de la comunidad de La Guaña.
Soy Carlos Brusil, soy de aquí de Cahuasquí.
Mi nombre es Ever Armas, nativo de la parroquia La Merced de Buenos Aires.
Me llamo Dominga Antún, socia jurídica del Centro Shuar San Luis Yanzas.
Mi nombre es Gabriela Burgos, represento a la comunidad de Puranquí. Nosotros somos una comunidad muy unida y estamos en contra de la minería.
Hace solo unos días, el presidente de Ecuador, Guillermo Lasso, anunció al mundo grandes compromisos ambientales. Sin embargo, en nuestro país ha declarado la guerra a las comunidades campesinas, que sufrimos una violenta invasión de empresas mineras.
Este es mi hogar, vivo en uno de los lugares más biodiversos del planeta y mi casa está sobre una concesión minera.
Estamos nosotros aquí defendiendo nuestra tierra, nuestro territorio y lo que es más, el agua, que es la vida de nosotros, para nosotros los agricultores.
Con el transcurso del tiempo va a ocasionar daños ambientales, los cuales van en contra de nuestra tradición de trabajo, que es la ganadería y agricultura.
Como guardaparque me siento ofendido también por problema de mucha contaminación y daños que hacen en los desiertos.
Las empresas Hanrin, las empresas australianas realmente nos están causando efectos tóxicos, efectos nocivos, división al tejido social en nuestra parroquia, en todo el Chocó andino.
El territorio ecuatoriano ha sido entregado a grandes corporaciones transnacionales para realizar actividades mineras. Las empresas mineras australianas controlan 220 concesiones que abarcan más de 700.000 hectáreas.
Las empresas que nos están afectando es Solgol y la ENSAEP, que aquí a nuestras espaldas está en la comunidad de la Florida, la Solgol, que ya está ahí asentada en el lugar de la comunidad.
Esta empresa es una transnacional australiana que amenaza a nuestra flora y fauna y sobre todo a la paz que siempre había en nuestra parroquia.
Soy una defensora criminalizada por la empresa minera Hanrin de origen australiano. Esta minera tiene 6 concesiones en mi territorio que son totalmente inconsultas, inconstitucionales e ilegales.
Cabe destacar que esta es ilegal. Utiliza a nuestra policía para agredir a los defensores de los derechos, a las mujeres que defienden nuestros territorios.
Y la minería australiana, la empresa minera australiana, pues nos ha venido a intimidar, a imponer la minería a sangre y fuego.
Y acá tenemos la presencia de la empresa Hanrin y de la BHP con las concesiones Santa Teresa 1 y 2.
La inversionista australiana BHP Luminex. Esta empresa utiliza varias estrategias para confundir a la gente ingenua. Para ingresar en esta comunidad vino con el nombre Proyemin Sociedad Anónima. Luego cambió otro nombre, BHP Luminex. Ahora actualmente está con el nombre Zero Yatsur.
Estas empresas ingresaron sin nuestro consentimiento y violando el derecho a la consulta previa para pueblos indígenas y la consulta ambiental para pueblos mestizos, razón por la cual son ilegales. Nosotros vamos a luchar por nuestras tierras. Por favor, no inviertan en estas compañías.
Estamos en contra el 100% de lo que se trata de minería, ya que son empresas transnacionales las que quieren despojarnos de nuestro territorio.
Yo soy de Cahuasquí y queremos que nosotros no nos quiten nada de aquí de Cahuasquí porque nos van a desalojar de nuestras casas y nuestras tierras.
Siempre rechazamos como comunidades, como parroquias, rechazamos rotundamente no a la minería.
Nosotros los comuneros pedimos a la empresa Zero Yatsur que se retire en nuestro territorio colectivo.
Así es que compañeros, pierden su tiempo si ustedes quieren venir a instalar sus minas acá en nuestro territorio. Aquí nosotros lo defenderemos con la vida si es necesario.
We ask people to really reconsider their investment in Australian mining projects in Ecuador. This is the most biodiverse country in the world. We're not communists, we're not radicals, we're people like you who have families and want a decent quality of life for our children. And the investment you're making is a really poor one. It's going to affect thousands of families and their access to water, which directly affects, obviously, their food security as well.
Como mujer que soy, como madre que soy, queremos que nuestras futuras generaciones conozcan y tengan una vida digna para nuestros futuros hijos, para nuestros futuros descendientes.
Nosotros tenemos aquí pancartas y estamos unidos contra la minería, siendo una manera de protesta para poder defender nuestras aguas.
¡Por aquí, libre de minería!
Thanks for watching that, everybody. And now we'll hand over to Yvonne to speak. Are you there, Yvonne? Yes, there you are. Hola.
Listo, muchísimas gracias.
Hi, hello, thank you. I'm Yvonne Ramos, Acción Ecological. We are an organization, environmentalists from Ecuador. We were born more than 35 years ago, and we are part of more than 50 national entities, which is called Caminantes Antinero, anti-mining workers. I would like to highlight some main points that we have seen in the video. Ecuador. Sorry, the interpreter has problem with the connection. I cannot really hear the speaker. Ecuador is a very central country in South America, and there's something very interesting. One of the features of Ecuador is that it has a lot of biodiversity. It's a very rich country in biodiversity. As we have seen in the video, we have now 220 mining concessions given to Australian companies, which are taking more than 700,000 hectares in our land. And 2.5% of the total of the land. Sorry, the interpreter cannot hear very well. So some of them are very negative. We have BHP and SolGold. These companies are located, as you have seen, in territories where there are indigenous communities living there. The Shuar people, Domingo Andrew, were there talking about their territory, and it's very serious because there's an negative impact on the mountain range of the condor with a lot of biodiversity, and then places with very old ancestral agriculture traditions. So we have to see the context, but then we have to zoom in and see more precisely what is happening with Hanrin. This is a company which is in the northwest of Ubabura, the province of Ubabura. And what has happened there with a brutal intervention of this company, Hanrin, and I think the most important thing to highlight is that they have a very tight relationship with the illegal mining. And the illegal mining, as we call it, came through this territory through hired murderers, people that have been hired to kill. It's a kind of mining that doesn't take on board any kind of responsibility, no liability, and invaded a land with peasant communities, farmers, and they were supplying food to the nearby cities. These traditional communities in the area had very negative attack in 2017. There was this illegal mining invasion. But what is worse, 2 years later, the state came and kicked out the illegal miners to allow Hangreen to come in. And Hangreen now has come in, but they are working with workers in Hungary that before were the illegal miners, and it had taken the land with these practices of organized crime. In this situation, we see this link, this joining forces between what is illegal, the organized crime, the illegality, and the mining companies. Something awful as well is to see how the companies now are forcing the state and the state defense forces to act on their behalf. They asked the government ministry for protection, the company Hungary, and asked the police to go and evict the local community that were preventing from the mining company to access the land. This context is where we are working. The many mining Australian companies in our country are tightening the social tension in the country. The local communities are standing up for their rights, trying to prevent the arrival of companies in different parts of the country, not in only one place, in many different places. They're trying to force the mining in the land, and people are up defending themselves, up in our fighting. And we are working with many different organizations asking for amnesty. We are going to the Assembly, National Assembly, to ask for amnesty for more than 215 activist defenders. We have a colleague, she's the lawyer, she's the lawyer that is trying to achieve the amnesty for all these activists. And 4 years ago, she was as well denounced by the miners. Her name is Julie Tenorio, and they want her to become a criminal. So they're trying to process charges against her. They're saying that she's organizing violent acts in the territory. And that's something very common in our country. Probably is happening as well in other countries. I don't know. So those that are defending nature now are being criminalized and are being treated as criminals. This situation makes us be very alert. We have to be very careful.
We'll have to wrap up now, sorry.
Entonces, bueno, eso quería como poner Yeah, I just want to highlight these points and a few ideas, takeaway points, very specific before I finish. The climate change is a pretext, is excuse to enlarge mining areas, trying to extract more mineral resources to change the energy models. So they are enlarging the areas of destruction, trying to find these new ores, these new metal sources in order to change the energy model, which is only making it deeper, having a more energy use model, and which means as well a more having more capital in some parts of the planet. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Listo, ya terminé.
Thank you so much, Yvonne.
I finished.
And so much amazing work happening through your networks, and also thank you for creating that video that I know that was just created in time for this, so really appreciate all the work that you're doing. Our next speaker is joining us from the Philippines Australian Solidarity Association, and this is May Kotsakis. If you want to start sharing your screens, you're welcome to do so. And if people want to put any questions they may have in the chat, again, you're welcome to do that. Hello, May, are you there?
I didn't realize I was on mute. All right, good evening, yes. I acknowledge the traditional custodian of this land I am in, the Watawarong, Woiwurrung, and Bunwurrung peoples of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I will share my screen. Can you see my screen? Can you see the screen? Okay.
Yeah.
The Philippines is the fifth most mineralized country in the world. It has the third biggest gold reserve, fourth biggest copper reserve, and the sixth biggest nickel reserve. The Philippines is also the world's second largest nickel producer. But today, I will focus my talk on OceanaGold, an Australian-Canadian company with mining operation in the Dipio, Nueva Vizcaya, in the northern part of the Philippines. OceanaGold acquired the Financial and Technical Assistance Agreement, or the FTAA, in 2006. Before the agreement were this agreement were implemented after the passing of the Mining Act of 1995 by the then Philippine President Fidel Ramos. These agreements are type of mineral concessions that allow 100% foreign ownership and capital investment and incentives and auxiliary rights, such as the rights to timber and water, to their concession areas. Foreign companies with this agreement can also enjoy tax-free operations. Oh, it is my my share. My screen is not moving. What happened? Sorry. Is my screen okay? It doesn't move.
Yes, you can see now.
Okay. Before OceanaGold acquired the right to mine the area, Climax Aramco Mining Corporation held the license, but due to strong opposition of the locals, the mining operation was delayed. Yep, I am sharing screen.
Yeah.
The protest against mining continued in 2006. And so Climax Aramco decided to leave the area and transfer the agreement to OceanaGold. Okay, those are the protests. Local established barricades to protect their lands. Undaunted by the violence and determined to save their lands from plunder and destruction, locals in the Dipio resisted the demolition of houses. A 200-member demolition crew plus 100 OceanaGold security guards in conjunction with the Philippine National Police demolished houses in the DPU, with a local getting shot by OceanaGold guard. The barricades persisted even after these attacks. Locals recount how more than 100 men, women, minors, and the elderly were hurt during the barricade dispersal in October 2009. This is the DPU, before OceanaGold started operation. During the people's long resistance, OceanaGold, despite of the people's long resistance, OceanaGold succeeded in commencing full commercial production in 2013. And the mineral being extracted in OceanaGold operation are gold, silver, and copper, plus other minerals in small quantities. The opposition to OceanaGold continues, and it expanded to other areas in the Philippines and overseas, including in Canada, the US, and here in Australia. The people of the town, including the governor and other town officials, opposed the mining operation. In 2007, Oxfam Australia released the result of their 5-year investigation and found out the lack of prior informed consent of the people and the harassment of townspeople, especially the indigenous people in the DPU. In 2011, the Commission of Human Rights issued a resolution regarding the burning of houses, the forced evacuation of residents, and the harassment of the residents of the area and surrounds. In 2013 and 14, fact-finding mission from Australia and other countries reports show the massive pollution of air and water, the drying of the river, and the destruction of the forest. The report also showed the abuse of workers, including wages below the minimum wage. Those are the tailings, you know. It's like a river. In 2017, further 133 families were forced to leave the area due to militarization of the surrounding areas by the armed forces of the Philippines. This was followed by illegal arrest and detention of activists, harassment of activists, and environmental defenders continue to date. Red tagging was also rampant. Last year, OceanaGold engaged more than 100 police to break the people's barricade at the entrance of the mine. The barricade was organized when the license of OceanaGold expired in June 2019, yet OceanaGold continued its operation. In July this year, President Duterte renewed OceanaGold's permit for another 25 years. In Australia, PASA started a sustained campaign in 2013 in support of people's opposition to the OceanaGold operation. In 2016 to 2018, we campaigned in solidarity with El Salvadoran people. They were protesting against OceanaGold case, bringing the El Salvadoran government to court for canceling their license to mine in El Salvador. With support from various groups and individuals in Australia, we continued our campaign and held a monthly picket in front of OceanaGold's office at Collins Street. Those are our pickets every year. Last year, however, OceanaGold moved its office to Queensland, so we can no longer picket them. We coordinate our campaign with organizations in the Philippines, such as the Center for Environmental Concerns, or the CEC, Kalikasan, and local groups on the ground, such as ANBIC, Disama, and others. Let me also share to you the other two major campaigns here in Australia. We campaign on human rights in the Philippines. Since Duterte became president of the Philippines in July 2016, extrajudicial killings had become so rampant. Attacks on critics and opposition, especially the activists, had become regular. It happens everywhere, in the city and in the countrysides. In the countrysides, there is also the militarization of villages and destruction of properties, including schools, churches, and homes. Many indigenous people were displaced by the militarization and raids on villages. More than 400 activists and oppositions were killed under Duterte. These include human rights advocates and the oppressed sectors of the society and their advocates. From July 2016, there are more than 60 lawyers and 20 paralegal workers killed, and more than 20 lawyers survived attempted killings. The numbers keep on adding, and probably today it could be more. And under the war on drugs, more than 25,000 were killed. These are environmental defenders that experience human rights abuses just during the lockdown. So from 2020. In Duterte's last State of the Nation address, last 26th of July, he boasted his continuing policy of extrajudicial killings of human rights defenders, advocates of the poor, and critics of his administration, and he shamelessly declared, "My orders to you, if you see them around, kindly shoot them dead, and I will be happy." These kinds of pronouncements by a president manifest the endorsement of the military and the police continuous human rights violation and a confirmation of the existence of culture of impunity in the country.
Sorry, May, we'll have to draw it to a close pretty quickly. Thanks.
Okay, these are just the human rights violation in 4 years since Duterte became president. Okay, I will just mention our other very important campaign, especially here in Australia. We are campaigning to stop Australian military aid to the Philippines. Australian military aid to the Philippines includes training of Philippine military and police in various areas such as urban warfare, intelligence gathering, as well as surveillance. These are in addition to financial and material support. We believe that the Australian military aid to the Philippines provides an impetus for the protection of the Australian economic interest in the region. Sadly and outrageously, it also provides incentives to the Philippine armed forces and help enables them in their human rights violation against government critics and opposition. So we are calling for the Australian government to, 1, publicly condemn the Duterte government's human rights record. Second, support the call for an independent investigative group to probe on the human rights violation in the Philippines, including the case filed with the International Criminal Court on the Duterte's crimes against humanity. And third, to immediately stop all military aids and support to the Philippines. I'll end here, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share the struggle of Filipinos.
Thank you so much, May. We'll move along quickly. Sorry, there's so much information to get through. We'll hand over to Lee Tan now, who is the policy coordinator of AidWatch Australia, and you should be able to share your slides now, Lee, and get started. Thanks so much again, May. Just muted there, Lee.
Is my screen share at the moment? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's just loading up now. Yep, it's there.
Oh, good. Oh, I can't get it to wait. It's still loading, is it?
No, it's there now.
Okay, I can't get back to it. I can't get back to the Zoom session.
Oh, we can just see the
worry.
first slide.
Yeah, I can just talk. Yeah, that's right. That's okay. Hi everyone. Okay, today I'm just going. Ooh, hang on. It's doing all sorts of funny thing here. I think it's loading it. That's why. Okay, good. All right. Yeah, I'll be talking about the campaign against an Australian company, Lynas Rare Earth, over its toxic and radioactive waste dumping in Malaysia. Okay, as Claire had mentioned earlier, about rare earth and what it is. Basically, it's used in modern electronic gadgets, but whether it's for renewable energy, all the digital equipment you're using, laptop, iPhone, anything that require digital or electronic technology requires some rare earth. They are known as the vitamins or the spice for the electronic industry. Companies do not need huge amount of rare earth in their production, but they are essential to make modern electronic gadgets powerful. And because of these, there is a huge demand for rare earth, particularly when because climate change solutions involve the use of high-tech technology like renewable energy, hybrid or electric cars, and low energy bulbs, and so on and so forth. So the demand for rare earth is expected to rise manyfold, and because of these, then you have many companies, both Australian, American, and Canada and elsewhere, all looking at setting up rare earth processing plant. Now, specifically, I'd like to share with you my experience dealing with Lynas Rare Earth. These flow charts here show you what they've been doing. So they mine the rare earth ore from their mine in Mount Weld in a remote part of Western Australia. And then it's trucked on road to the port of Fremantle, which then got loaded onto container and traveling for about 4,000 kilometers from the port of Fremantle to the port of Kuantan. And Kuantan is my hometown. And in 2011, when we first found out about this project from the New York Times magazine, basically locals were not consulted at all. They were not even made aware of this project until it appeared in an article or series of articles in the New York Times magazine. And everyone was very shocked that this world's largest rare earth plant outside of China would be built, and they know nothing about it. They knew about rare earth and its hazards because previously in another state, the Asian rare earth, which was partly owned by Japan's Mitsubishi, has left behind radioactive waste and also caused very serious public health problems there, with cases of leukemia in children, children born with disability, and so on and so forth. And that plant closed in 1984, and the radioactive waste was entombed in a forest not far from the town. So because of that experience, Malaysians are not keen to have another one. And for them to find out that this is going to be like 50 times bigger than the one in Bukit Merah or in the other state, they were shocked. And of course, it didn't take long before people started to rise up and to campaign against this project. And this is what it is today. About the plant started to operate in 2012. Unfortunately, despite protests and despite many attempts to try and stop it, the Malaysian government under the then Najib Razak government is one that is known and notorious for its international scale financial corruption. And so, you know, a government like that are not likely to be responsive to people's protests, even though 1.2 million people have signed against it. Over 1,000 submissions was lodged with the government against the project, but the government issued a temporarily operating license in early 2012. Although at that time, the promise was to remove the radioactive waste, which is this reddish waste at the back here, from Malaysia, but that has since changed. And so today you've got this massive amount of waste dumped in the open, and Malaysia being a tropical rainforest country, you know, rain a lot, and the tropical deluge basically washed many of these, much of this waste into the waterways and the natural environment around it. The way Lynas is managing this waste is really a double standard. In Australia, in Western Australia, Lynas is proposing to build a similar plant. Just recently, the Western Australian Environmental Protection Authority has required Lynas to transport both of these waste back to the mine pit to be managed according to radioactive waste management plan. But in Malaysia, you know, this is what you get. Now, the place where the plant is built is actually once a pristine tropical peat land, peat mangrove. It's very close to the South China Sea. It is, you know, it's kind of quite a populated area with traditional Malay fishing villages dotted all along the coast. And the plant is within like 2 to 5 kilometers from the area's most populated center. And the wastewater from the plant is basically discharged directly into the Balok River, which is the river that feeds into the peat mangrove. And the peat mangrove is actually a source of traditional fishing for the people, where people, you know, get their shellfish. And as you know, mangrove is important spawning and breeding grounds for many fish and marine species, but none of that's been taken into consideration when Lynas built its plant. And at the estuary, you see children playing quite happily in this water, and yet, you know, they've been contaminated, but the government has done nothing about it. So Balok mangrove by Malaysian biological diversity standard is actually a very important mangrove area due to the species diversity of flora. Although not a lot of surveys carry out on this mangrove, locals had used it for a long, long time. As I say, you know, for fishing and a whole range of other recreational and also cottage industry. But none of that's been taken into consideration when the plant was built in the upper reach of this mangrove. And only a preliminary EIA or environmental impact assessment was done, and much of the issue have not been covered properly. And also the health impact is not dealt with at all in this case, despite the presence of very long-living radioactive materials like thorium, uranium, even rare earths themselves are by no means harmless. Study on the health impact of rare earth is still very recent, but increasingly they're finding problems in China, where children exposed to certain type of rare earth are found to have developmental issues, kidney problems, and so on and so forth. So rare earth itself is not harmless, and it needs to be studied more in terms of its health impact and also environmental impact. And despite making a mess, Lynas continue to claim that its operation is totally zero harm. And that is what makes people in Kuantan so angry, because they are seeing the waste piling up. And yet this company continue to live in denial, and it's facilitated by the government's own regulators. The regulators have firstly, no technical capacity to manage a plant of this size. They do not understand radiation hazard as much. And also there's no political will for them to actually do the right thing, to operate according to their public mandate to protect the health of the environment and the citizen. So, what we get is the regulator singing praises of Lynas just because it's an Australian company, and because Lynas acts and behaves like a real bully. So, given the situation, it is no wonder that Malaysia Malaysians, particularly the residents of Kuantan and surrounding area, has taken it upon themselves to get organized, and they have protested since 2011. And unfortunately, they are seeing the waste piling up every day. They have a lot of support from amongst themselves. They've got some international expert support as well, and we have networked with activists in Australia, in Japan, and also we've got a waste expert from Germany to first write a very detailed critique of the plant and its waste management. And increasingly, we are looking at USA, where Lynas has managed to get funding from Pentagon to build another rare earth plant in Texas.
Sorry, Lee, we're going to have to wrap up. We're almost out of time for the session. Yep.
Okay. So anyway, as Claire has mentioned too, the reason why Lynas is in Malaysia is because of the hazardous processing, and also because of China domination over this particular mineral. And it is easy to bully a developing country to accept very low standard of safety and so on and so forth. And I'd just like to conclude that, although we know and acknowledge that rare earth elements are critical for low emission green technology and for energy transition to tackle climate change, the supply chain must be clean, just, and fair. And solution to address climate change must not replicate the negative social and environmental impacts of fossil fuel supply chain. And thank you very much. That's all I've got to say. I can't share. Can you? Oh, okay. I think I can. Good.
Right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this session. I just wanted to end with this image to show you a few of the ways you can follow up with us. Unfortunately, we tried to pack a lot in, so we haven't managed to allow for the time for having the panel discussions, but we have noted everybody's contact details to follow up, and unfortunately it does seem like there's not really time to have that chat because there's back-to-back sessions on today. So please do quickly add in your email in the chat now if you did want to be part of the continued discussion, and we'll make sure we grab that before we close. And again, we can give you a little bit of extra time. Really? Okay.
Yeah. We've got 10 more minutes. This is a really great session, and I don't want it to end too suddenly. So I think we can have like a last 10-minute wrap up so people can kind of give their final reflections on this subject.
Great. All right. Well, in that case, I would like to maybe hand over to Claire or Liz, if either of you would like to make a comment about the research that you're doing and how that will hopefully bring together a bit more of a picture about Australian companies' activities across the world, and how we can kind of stay in touch with that going forward.
Thanks so much to all the speakers. Yeah, I think, Liz, maybe, you know, you had those things that you wanted to say in your presentation that would really speak to that.
And there's been a couple of questions in the chat.
Well, Liz, your audio is dragging a little bit there. We're continuing to grab people's emails from that chat as well. So we will be able to follow up with some of those links.
Have we lost Liz, do you think?
I think we might have lost Liz.
Okay.
Well, one of the questions that we were going to discuss in the panels, also just to let you know that Belinda had to head off to get her kids ready for school, so she's not with us, unfortunately. But what do people think about the green agenda and responding to the climate crisis, and how this has changed what is now considered an acceptable mine? Are people noticing a big change in how many projects are getting pushed through? And any of our speakers, you're welcome to jump in on this, and happy to.
I might add something there. What we're noticing is life of mine of some of the existing projects which before the green economy and green revolution were unviable and uneconomic. So some nickel mines, lithium projects, for instance, were literally unknown. And, you know, the rebranding of copper as the green mineral. So so that's just one of the comments. I think there's more investment into these projects now, so there's a flow of capital that we need to keep track of.
Yeah, I think like from what we're seeing doing our stakeholder analysis, there's a lot of buzz around these metals, and there's a lot of talk about there needing to be less red tape to get them through. And they're speaking about, the miners in particular are speaking about the need for greater access to projects. And I think we've also seen that the World Bank is offering support to developing nations to tidy up their regulations to ensure that a greater access for these companies and a more rapid sort of setup of projects, because I think with rare earths, it takes quite a significant amount of time to sort of get the feasibility to get a project up and running. So that's just the talk that we're hearing, and on the ground, I can't really speak to that just yet, but we're definitely seeing new project applications being put forward and expanding into areas that hadn't previously been even considered for some companies, like in the DRC and things.
One other thing I'd just like to add, I said it in the chat, but there's discussion, a lot of talk going on about uranium mining and nuclear being the solution to green energy. And I've been campaigning against uranium mining for many years, and it is definitely not the green solution that everyone thinks it is.
Quisiera poder hablar, ¿es posible?
If I can talk, is that possible? Yes. In Acción Ecológica in Ecuador, we have been analyzing for many years. We've analyzed climate change and the fake and real solutions. In our country, for many years, we think that a real solution in climate change is to tackle the real problem. So about we have to keep those fossil fuels on ground, and we have to stop gas flaring. We have to analyze what's happening in the north, what's happening in the economies that think that are the model, the economic model to follow. They accumulate the money, they are extractivists. And the solution that they are giving, the green solutions they're giving is, for example, to have some forest zones to absorb carbon emissions, or changing the energetic model and change from fossil fuels to electronic fuels. If we keep thinking in accumulation and gathering, then it won't bring a real solution, a real global solution. So we have to criticize this structure in the model, the logics and the solutions they are giving. If the big companies is the main core and it always has to have benefits, then the countries in the south will be suffering. We will suffer the consequences of that model, will destroy the culture, the communities. So they're just taking from us what we have, and they're not giving real solutions. We have to keep minerals and fossil fuels on ground. We don't need the gold for charges or for other purposes. So I think we have to think about it deeply. I'm so sorry. I just needed it. I had to share my vision and point of view. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. I'm afraid we are very much over time now, and unfortunately we do need to wrap up for the next session. Everybody who has put their contact in the chat, we will be following up, and you know, a lot of work has already been done from frontline communities and the research that's happening now, and we really want to bring everyone together and try to elevate each other's work and struggle as much as we can. So look forward to continuing this conversation with you all and working out how we can support each other in the best ways. Thank you again to the COP People Summit organisers and translators as well, and our tech support. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I just wanted to say on behalf of the COP26 coalition, thank you for everybody who came as a panelist and speaker, and also thank you hugely to our audience. It's really amazing to have multilingual sessions, and especially multilingual sessions where we can hear from frontline communities from all over the world who are fighting against extractivism. So thank you, everybody, and special thanks to the interpretation team and the tech team for facilitating us to be able to hear each other and understand each other across languages. I'm going to end this session now, but it was a lovely session, and thank you so much for your participation.
Bye bye. Thank you.